Thanks for tuning in. I'm Andy Zopp, and this is Chicago Newsroom 2.0. This week, on a special edition of the Newsroom, we'll take a 360-degree view of youth safety and engagement in Chicago. One-on-one, A Better Chicago CEO Beth Swanson joins me to discuss key findings and recommendations from her organization's recently released report, State of Our Youth. At the Roundtable, I'll sit in conversation with the heads of BUILD, Inc., Erie Neighborhood House, Together Chicago, and Youth Guidance to talk about the critical work each organization is doing on the ground in support of our youth. I'll also be joined by CPS's former Chief of Safety and Security, Jadine Chou, and the Executive Director of the Cook County Justice Advisory Council, Avik, to discuss the coordination of the work of government, community, and nonprofit organizations in an effort to achieve true scale and efficacy of the supports and resources dedicated to Chicago's young people. But first, on the other side of a short break, I'll sit with Women Employed CEO Cherita and Chief of Staff Mary Kay Devine to discuss the organization's upcoming Working Lunch event. Stay with us.
Every community has a story, a pulse, a voice waiting to be heard. At CAN TV, we bring these stories to life, from the heart of Chicago to your living room. Join us in supporting hyper-local television. Your backing helps us cover what matters directly in our communities, unfiltered and upfront. Help tell the important stories of our communities. Become a program underwriter today.
At a time when economic equity and workplace justice are top of mind for many women and families, one organization has been leading the charge for more than 50 years. Women Employed has long fought to ensure all women, especially women of color, have the opportunity to advance, thrive, and be treated fairly in the workplace. Joining us now are two of the driving forces behind that mission, CEO Cherita and Chief of Staff Mary Kay Devine. Cherita and Mary Kay, welcome to the Newsroom.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
So first, let's just level set for everybody. Can we tell a little bit about, I'll start, Cherita, with you to talk a little bit about Women Employed. So we know they're 50 years old and you're doing very powerful work, but talk a little bit about the organization.
Yeah, so the organization has been around since 1973, as I'm sure you're aware, really focused on improving workplaces for women. And we do that by affecting policy change, by doing research, and really focused on innovative programming, but at the systems level. So we do that in education and workforce development to make sure that women have access to the careers and training that will lead them to living wages, but we also focus on the policies that improve workplaces.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the policies. What are the biggest policies right now? What are the big policy issues that you're focused on?
Yeah, we've been trying to build on past victories and expand laws, so things like paid sick time, where we've had some victories here in Chicago, and we're now trying to pass paid sick time for all and paid family medical leave at the state level. We had some pretty big wins over the past couple of years with advancing equal pay. One of those key laws is the No Salary History Bill. So that helps women who sometimes have to step in and out of the workforce and get paid lower based on bias.
So just explain what the bill does.
Yeah, no, it's great.
Kay,
it really, yeah, I'm happy to.
It's kind of encapsulated in the title, but for everybody who's not sure, people.
No, it's really powerful. So any of us women who have been either hired for a lower wage based on pure bias, or we've had to step in and out of the workforce for caregiving responsibilities, frequently our salaries are lower. And so then you go and you interview for that next job, and when you are asked, what was your prior salary? What did you make at your last job? Depending on your reasons and your life circumstances, it might be much lower than some of your colleagues, male or female, frankly. So we victoriously passed the No Salary History law that makes it illegal now for employers or recruiters or even temporary agencies to ask what your prior salary is. And then we doubled down on that law, aiming to close the wage gap by requiring employers to make their salaries transparent. And all that really means is by adding a salary range to every job description, so that no one's wasting each other's time. You know, if my target salary is $70,000 and they're only going to pay me $50,000, then I don't even need to apply for this job. And then there's no shenanigans with, you know, going back to bias and lower salaries. So 2 big wins for equal pay.
Right, and that's in Illinois law. So now in the state, if you're making a job posting, you have to put a salary range. Oh,
Yeah.
Who knew?
That went in effect January.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's very recent.
Yeah.
It passed a year ago, but it didn't go. We allowed employers to have a year to ramp up because they needed time, but it went into effect this past January.
Right. Well, and I think, you know, as you said, I think people don't even necessarily think about the impact that those 2 pieces, right? Asking someone what they were before, but also people not knowing what the position should be. And I think people forget that the way it should work is that a position has a salary, right?
Right.
And if you get that job, you should get that salary,
Right.
Or somewhere in the range, right? So, Cherita, has the focus shifted at all, or are we still talking about, feels a little bit like we're still talking about some of the same issues, salary disparity, equity in the workplace, or does it feel like we're making progress, or that we're still focusing on some of the issues that we've been focusing on?
So we were making progress. We were making great progress until January, where there's a full-on attack on all the progress that we've made over the last 50, 60 years when it comes to gender equity, as well as equity for people of color. There's an attack on all diversity, equity, and inclusion. There's the rescinding of affirmative action. You know, all of these attacks are happening. So right now we have to focus on not only continuing to push forward and forge ahead on policies that we know we still need to pass, like paid family and medical leave, but now we have to defend. We have to defend what we've earned thus far, and also protect what we've gained in Illinois. So defend at the federal level, protect in the state of Illinois, who, you know, have very progressive workplace policies, and also focus on continuing to push further ahead so that, you know, our daughters won't have less rights than what we did.
Yeah, can we talk about that a little bit? Because I think not everybody understands. I think, you know, at a high level, people get, well, if we're not going to talk about diversity and inclusion, maybe that's not good. But I don't think people really understand how it plays out. So, Mary, can you talk a little bit about how some of the new kind of guidelines are impacting or could impact some of the gains that we were talking about?
No, Cherita and I were actually at an event this morning where we were talking about very progressive workplace policies around paid parental leave, paid family leave. And the employees were all saying, you know, this really made a fundamental difference in their ability to be present as a family member, a caregiver, as well as a very present and effective staff person. Right. And Cherita made such a point where she said, let's just name these type of policies fall under this umbrella of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so I think there might be a lot of women, and I say women out there, who are thinking diversity, equity, and inclusion is speaking about somebody else.
Right.
Maybe it's only people of color. Maybe it's only people in the LGBTQ community. And they're not realizing that their rights are going to get chipped away and that they have real personal losses that they might be facing, specifically when you think about the advancements that women have made in the workplace.
Because maternity leave impacts women primarily, is that kind of the thinking? If people take it to the kind of the extremes.
It is, and so ERG, employee resource groups, are under attack.
Right.
So anything that seems to separate an individual group is under attack. When we think about even where do you go when you have a complaint? Where do you go when you feel like you've been wronged by your employer, which is the EEOC? And now we know that they're shifting. So at first the thought was that they're going to dismantle the EEOC. They tore it down so that they can build it back up in the image in which they want. Yeah. So they're shifting the focus of the EEOC. And now the EEOC is focused on identifying employers that are conducting illegal diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, as well as protecting the rights of binary men and women, and making sure that there is a place for people to go to if they feel like they are being forced to use pronouns if they don't want to, or being forced to acknowledge someone's identified sex if they don't want to. Now they can go to the EOC and put in a claim and sue.
Right.
So those are the very simple ways that you can look at this and to understand how this impacts everyday people.
Right. Wow. And removes protections that women have had. Here in Illinois, though, we're let me step back a little bit. We talked a little bit about the laws in Illinois. How are you feeling? What are you hearing from employers? Because I know you work with employers. Are you feeling like, and a lot of people have been very concerned, Target pulled back, and a lot of employers have been very overtly pulling back. Do you think that's going to impact some of the policies that you're talking about, or the gains that women have made, what some of the employers are saying?
I do, because I think employers play such a big role in this, because they have the ability to enact initiatives and policies at their level without having to be mandated. And so many employers were moving into the space where they understood that equity and inclusion and creating a workplace where everyone can thrive made smart business sense, right? And now they're saying, well, if I do this, I'm under attack, or I no longer have to do this. So you're seeing ERG groups disappear. You're seeing accommodations disappear. You're seeing tuition reimbursement for marginalized, employees disappear. And we are going to continue to see this impact, right? Because they're no longer mandated to do something. Now, the good employers will continue to do what's right. Would have embedded this into their culture regardless of what it's called. And those policies and practice will continue. And so what we're doing is working with employers to show them how they can continue to do this without coming under attack, or not being afraid, because the law of the land is still the same. An executive order doesn't change the law. So just because you see an executive order that called DEI illegal doesn't make it illegal.
Right, exactly, which is, of course, requires then the fight in the courts, and that's what people are trying to avoid. But it sounds like to me that particularly in the current environment, I know that your work's always been important, but it sounds like to me that in the current environment, your work is even more important, and you need support for that. And you've got a luncheon coming up to help you raise that support. Tell us a little bit about the luncheon.
Yes, the luncheon is called the Working Lunch. It is on Thursday, May 22nd at the Chicago Hilton. We will be joined by about 700 of all of our closest friends. And the program will be to honor, we are honoring 3 honorees that are doing really important work in this area. So Gail Eisenberg is a civil rights attorney that's been doing so much work to advance women in the workplace. We're honoring CWIT, Chicago Women in Trades, and we know that they currently are suing the current administration because they saw funding come back. And then we're honoring an emerging leader, Izzy Dobell, as well.
Terrific. And so this is a big fundraiser for you, and you're expecting about 700 people. How can we encourage people to come to be there?
No, we make it really easy. So if folks are interested, they can visit our website, womenemployed.org/TWL. There's a lot of ways that people can support as individuals: purchasing tickets, sponsoring a table and hosting 10 friends, or sponsors, organizations and corporations. There's still sponsorship availabilities. And I think the most critical issue right now is every dollar that we raise at this event is going to go back into defending, advancing, protecting, and giving us the flexibility where we really need to be agile as things just keep coming at us.
So May 22nd, that's the important day of your lunch, the working lunch, of which CAN-TV is a very proud media sponsor and media partner. So we're thrilled to be doing that, and we're excited. And you can go to the website, Women Employed website, to get more information. On the other side of the break, A Better Chicago CEO Beth Swanson joins me to unpack the findings of the organization's recently released State of Our Youth report. Stay with us.
CAN-TV is the lens through which Chicago's stories are told. harnessing the unifying power of community television. With CAN TV On Demand, immerse yourself in the richness of our city through exclusive stories and programs tailored just for you, connecting you to the heartbeats of our streets, the voices of our people, and the spirit that makes Chicago unique. Discover the strength of your community on CAN TV On Demand.
How are Chicago's young people really doing? And what will it take to ensure they're supported, seen, and set up for success? A new report from A Better Chicago titled State of Our Youth takes a hard and honest look at the challenges facing our city's youth, especially Black and brown students, and offers bold ideas for how we can collectively do better. Joining us now is Beth Swanson, CEO of A Better Chicago, to break down the findings, what they reveal about systemic gaps in education and opportunity, and how philanthropy, policy, and community can come together to create lasting change. Beth, welcome to the newsroom. How are you?
Good.
It's great to see you.
Thanks, Andy.
So let's start with first for my audience. What is A Better Chicago? It's actually an entity, not a phrase.
It is. It's both. But yes, we are. A Better Chicago is the only venture philanthropy actually in Chicago. We are a 501c3, which is a nonprofit, but we take a page out of venture capital. So what that means is really simple. We raise and pool dollars, and then we invest those dollars in unrestricted grants into nonprofits that we believe are highly effective, high impact, helping young people on a path out of poverty towards a family sustaining wage ultimately.
Right.
So serving kids from 0 to 24, sort of cradle to career, and we help basically invest in them and scale their impact.
And venture people typically think about return. Is return outcomes from the grants that you give?
Exactly, it's outcomes. So we're very data-driven, evidence-based, and so our value proposition really to all of our donors is that we will measure the impact of their investment. They trust us to find the best organizations in the city and really help them grow, and then we report back on those sort of social outcomes.
Wow, that's terrific.
Yeah.
And so what prompted the study that we're about to talk about, State of Our Youth?
Yeah, so we are 15 years old as an organization, and really we're in a reflective moment of realizing we've learned a lot. So in those 15 years, we serve now, I think when we started it was about 2,500 youth. 15 years later, we're serving 60,000 young people annually through all the investments we make. And have deployed $83 million in our history.
Wow. Say that again so people can hear that.
$83 million
that's incredible.
In the young people of Chicago. And so we're proud of the work, but we also realize what we do is necessary but not sufficient for the scale of Chicago. So what we wanted to do is take our knowledge and our sort of evidence and data-driven approach and really make it accessible to all. So we did two things. We built out a what we call the Youth Opportunity Dashboard, and what that does is it provides a snapshot, really holistic snapshot of how young people are faring in the city of Chicago from, again, 0 to 24. We have 30 indicators from reading and math proficiency to chronic absenteeism, housing instability, youth employment, access to early childhood, all the things we all know make for a healthy life. And so we made that data accessible to all, anyone who's serving youth. And then the second thing we did is we do an annual youth survey. So we want to hear directly from youth themselves in Chicago. It's a representative sample of youth in Chicago, and to really hear what the challenges they face day to day, what they believe investments are needed for them to be successful. And so we put those two together into what we called our State of Our Youth report. And then we hope to do this, annually for the city.
Wow, I would think getting young people to respond to a survey could be challenging. How do you do that?
It is. We use a very good partner, Global Strategies Group, and they're incredible. And they've had a great track record of doing this. And we get 400 to 700 youth.
Wow. And how often do you? Is this the first time? Annual.
So we've done it. This will be a third year. We're about to go in the field again, and we typically do it over the summer months. But the actual report of kind of putting all of this together, it's the first time we've done it.
Wow. So for this report, what were some of the findings, and were things? Well, what were some of the most significant findings? Let's from your perspective.
Yeah, there's a lot.
You've been doing
there's a lot in there.
There's a lot in there. But let's talk about some of the things that you thought would be the thing you want people to know about and to be thinking about as they think about our youth in the city.
Yeah, so first, on just the issue of poverty. So we have 1 in 4 young people living in poverty in the city of Chicago. When you look at ages 0 to 5, that goes to 43.5% of 0 to 5-year-olds are in poverty. In some neighborhoods, that can be as high as 90%.
Wow. And just so everybody understands, what does how are you defining poverty?
It's the state, federal, the poverty lines. So we're going along with how it's been defined for others and research. 94% of our youth respondents to the survey cite mental health as just a critical issue, and I feel like we all know that over the last handful of years, particularly once the pandemic hit. But that is resounding. That 94%, all races, ages, it just came back very clear, and they're looking for more supports around mental health. Another was we looked into violence and issues of violence. I think the headline there was that 1 in 4 young people report witnessing or being exposed to violence at least weekly.
Whoa. 1 in 4 report being exposed to violence weekly? And does violence include not just gun violence, right? You're talking about domestic violence or kid-on-kid violence, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Still, that's incredible.
Yeah,
really,
and it is
really
incredible.
Scary.
So that was we knew it, but then that stat came back and felt very stark.
Right.
The other is just, I would say, reading and math proficiencies. Everyone wants to know about academic gains. We obviously went through a major disruption of learning during the pandemic. We're really not back to pre-pandemic levels. So there's been some progress. There's some, some bright spots around 8th grade reading proficiency. But truly, when you look across all the measures, we're not back. So kids performing 2019 are performing higher than our kids today. So I think we eventually really need to, grapple with what's happening and how to accelerate that progress. And last thing I'll mention is chronic absenteeism. Really jumped out at us. 41% of Chicago public school students are chronically absent, and I feel like we don't hear enough about that. For those who may not know, that chronically absent is about 10% of the school year, about 18 days, which really gets to 4 weeks of the school year. So 41% of CPS students, enrolled CPS students, are missing a month or more of school. And so that seems to be something we all need to be talking about.
Yeah, wow. And you have to wonder, do you bracket the age, or is it just 41% of the students who responded? In other words, is it like high school?
Overall, it is higher
the higher we
go.
Of
yes,
course.
It tracks older.
Right. But still, I mean, that's, obviously if you're not in school, you're not learning. And wow.
It's still the major lever we have, for young people to be engaged and successful. And so, you can debate, how to make things more engaging in the classroom, et cetera. But bottom line, being in school is going to be, moving those metrics the right way.
Right, and that also means that they're not there, they're there and that absently, they're also become disconnected, which is another set of students that you took a look at, which are disconnected youth, and that's, they're not in school, they're not working, and you did have some data around that as well, yeah?
Yeah, we do see disconnected youth in the data, and I would say a couple of ways. We look at it as holistic. It's like a number of things I just mentioned, but it feels like a number of those things are playing out at once in those young people's lives. So, and we support an organization called MAFA, Redemption Project on the West Side, and they do an incredible job of supporting holistically, and it's focused on young men, Black and brown young men on the West Side. But it is, GED, it is exposure to work. They found housing instability to be an issue, so then now they're starting to provide housing to those who need it. There's food access. It becomes swiftly, it's not just a GED, but it's this suite of services and interventions that are needed to really help those young people back on a path towards a family-sustaining wage. So, we see sort of a number of things playing out for that population specifically.
Yeah. Speaking of that, where can people who are very interested in this topic and want to learn more, where can they find the study or look for it if they're interested?
Yeah, our website has it all.
Okay.
So
that would be-
www.abetterchicago.org. So
Okay.
just remember, abetterchicago.org.
Okay.
And you can download the report. You can also access the dashboard, which is open for anyone to be using. And we hope people will engage and really support their own work.
Well, thank you. We are shockingly out of time. I didn't get to half my questions, but we did cover some important stuff. Thank you for the work you're doing and for investing in the organizations that are investing in our young people. You and I happen to know pretty firsthand how important this work is. So I'm thrilled that you're continuing to do it. And thank you for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
On the other side of the break, I'll be joined at the Roundtable by leaders from some of the city's premier youth organizations to discuss the critical work each is doing on the ground, individually and collectively, to support Chicago youth. Stay with us.
Hi, I'm Dr. Candace Norcott. On this season of Be Well, we'll explore issues of emotional and mental well-being, centering Black women and men in an honest, engaging, and relatable way. From navigating generational trauma and microaggressions to managing stress in relationships. Join the conversation on CAN TV Cable Channel 19 or stream live on cantv.org or on the CAN TV Plus app. Elevated conversation and storytelling. Experience the power of community television.
Chicago's youth are full of promise, talent, and potential, but they're also facing serious challenges when it comes to safety, opportunity, and belonging, from gun violence to housing instability to gaps in education and mental health support. The stakes are high, and the need for action is urgent. Fortunately, there are organizations working on the ground every day to uplift, protect, and empower our young people. Joining me at the Roundtable this week are leaders from BUILD, Inc., Erie Neighborhood House, Youth Guidance, and Together Chicago, who along with other youth-serving organizations have joined forces as part of the Upstream Chicago Coalition. These leaders and their organizations share the goal of our city leaders to make Chicago a place where all youth grow up safely and thrive, no matter their zip code. BUILD, Inc. CEO Adam Alonso, Erie Neighborhood House Executive Director Cristina De La Rosa, Together Chicago Director of Education Initiatives Damien Howard, and Youth Guidance CEO Michelle Adler Morrison. Welcome to the Newsroom. So let's start. Adam, what are some of the biggest issues you're seeing with the young people you serve at BUILD?
Sure.
And maybe give us a little bit about where BUILD is and the population you serve.
Sure. So BUILD is headquartered on the west side in Austin. We serve the greater west side, Humboldt Park, all the way west through Austin. Some of the challenges that we have been seeing is that actually children in elementary school are exhibiting some of the very challenging things that you mentioned earlier. The third grader who has access to a gun and threatens a classmate, a 7-year-old who runs out of the classroom with significant mental health stress and trauma. These are things that really, I think, have surfaced certainly post-COVID, which is what drew me to reach out to my colleagues in the field to say, hey, was it just what we were seeing in our schools on the west side? Is this something that was happening across the city? And resoundingly, the answer was yes, this is happening across the city. What can we do together to really solve for some of these issues that we're seeing?
Right. So, Cristina, how about you and your organization? Talk a little. Are you seeing similar things? And
yes,
and
exactly.
And talk a little bit about where you're located in the population area of kids, young people you serve.
Yes. So Erie House is located in Westtown and Little Village, and we also have a presence in Humboldt Park, working with elementary and high school students. We are primarily working with immigrant communities or within immigrant communities, and are hearing from the young people that we're working with a lot of what we just started to talk about today. I think a big piece that as we're having conversations with young people is really they're hearing this narrative, right? And that's also taking a big impact on the pride they have within themselves, within their community, ownership of their community. And so we're really having to navigate what that means for them as they're hearing in the news what's happening, and experiencing these challenges and barriers within their community.
Damien, how about you? What's happening at Together Chicago? What are you seeing?
Yeah, so Together Chicago is a violence reduction and disruption agency. And I specifically oversee, as you said, the education initiatives. So my unique position within Together Chicago is how, as Adam stated earlier, do we go upstream, right? And try to work with young people earlier to prevent some of these dynamics of violence that we're seeing in the city. And I won't really echo the sentiments of my colleagues here because I'm seeing, of course, some of the same things as Together Chicago is working in pockets during mentoring during the school day, out of school time work, and other, again, preventative things. We're seeing those same things that were echoed and spoken here. I think just a subtle nuance that I'll bring to the conversation is I am very interested to see not only this collective impact movements, but others come together, right? Because I think that that's a part of the solution that I would love to see. Like, I think that there's power, agency, and opportunity when we say, hey, y'all are over there convening, thinking about violence disruption work. We're over here. Why are we not all coming together? So I just love that Adam's bringing us together for this conversation.
All right, terrific. Michelle, youth guidance. Tell us a little bit about what you do and if you're seeing also some of the same things.
Yeah, I'm just grateful to be part of this conversation, to be honest, and this beautiful community that we have in this city of nonprofits who are, really trying to solve some of the more, what seem to be intractable problems. At Youth Guidance, we work with over 15,000 youth across the city, and we do that in partnership, so everything we do is school-based. We try to remove every single barrier possible that a young person would have to getting the support they need when they need it most. We're seeing incredibly important improvements in mental health. Young people are suffering, right? They are really suffering, and so we've dedicated ourselves to figuring out how do we help in a destigmatizing way, help young people improve their mental health. Also, intervening early.
Yeah.
There are things we could be doing that we've proven we can do, that if we invest in young people at just the right time and go upstream, we can prevent the severe exposure to community violence, the severe participation in violent crime. So that's what we're doing. We're also focused on improving education outcomes. So significant improvements in on-time graduation rates. And I think if anything we've learned collectively is that all of us have a part to play in moving upstream and giving young people the chance they deserve. It's like they're sponges. They act like they're closed and they're not. They're really truly open to the support if we're there to give it to them when they need it most.
Some people might say that, if you go too far upstream, you're starting to address issues with young people before they get there, and maybe you're even causing some of the stress. I mean, how do you get to? Because I would think not every third grader necessarily has issues. So how do you balance that?
Yep, it's a good question. I know part of the work that we do at BUILD is certainly with comprehensive youth services, as well as my colleagues are doing. But we know that partnership with the families is critical. And it's not just mom and dad, it really is a whole household, right? Sometimes you have a couple generations or more living under one roof. And how do you support them? And it could just be that there's an adult in the house that wants a better job opportunity, right? But we have a partner who does workforce development. Great, let's plug you two together. Could be that you had a rough month and you're worried about your lights getting turned off. Well, let us get you on the lights this month, and let's see what else we need to do to put in place. Not every young person is going to need support, but every young person needs a mentor, a positive youth, a positive adult in their lives. And so just by the very fact of the nature of the work we do, whether it's positive youth development activities, sports, music, art, whatever it may be, all that helps a young person to develop. Now, does a family always need all the supports? No. But they may not need it now, but 6 months from now, something may happen. There may be a death or some other instance that happens where they need support. So that's the importance of sort of building that relationship with families.
Right. Adam mentioned mentoring. Michelle, I know that that's an important part of the work at Youth Guidance. Talk a little bit about why that's so important and how you apply it in the work that your organization's doing.
Yeah, change happens through a relationship, just like learning happens through relationships. And young people need access to adults who have their back, and as Adam was saying, like not waiting till too long, too far down when you need help. You really have to form a strong, positive relationship with a trusted adult. And we've found at Youth Guidance, we have one program called BAM, another one called WOW, that really takes members of the community with lived experiences, but also the expertise and savvy to be a credible messenger and walk alongside young people and develop deep connections and serve as role models and mentors. But change isn't happening just between the young person and that adult. We're really kind of shifting the ways young people can be together and creating really safe and brave spaces so that they can support one another. And you'd ask the question about everybody doesn't need everything, right? But I want to talk about the fact that we don't have great ways to assess need, right? Like, first of all, we're very deficit oriented. We wait till there's like a severe problem and then we try to solve it as if it's some kind of medical model. And I don't think that does young people or our communities justice. Like, they have so many assets, right? Like, everybody could go through a really challenging time and you might appear to be doing okay, but you're not. And we learned that through our Working on Womanhood program. We're working with young women, 7th through 12th graders in the Chicago Public Schools. And we had this randomized control study done by the University of Chicago. And one of the data points that blew me away is that the young women in WOW, and these are just young women in our schools, had trauma exposure, so post-traumatic stress, at levels higher than soldiers returning from Iraq and Afghanistan.
Wow.
So these are young women who are getting B's, right? They're not failing, they're showing up to school, but they've witnessed trauma. They've witnessed violence, community violence, or intergenerational, whole lots of things that have made it not possible for their needs to be identified. And so part of the issue, I think, is if we can be present, if we can engage through mentorship, through trusted adults, young people all of a sudden feel like they have someone where they can be seen, heard, valued, and talk about what they're experiencing.
Right.
The power of mentorship is incredible.
Right. Cristina, providing that kind of safe space and that support, what does that do in the long run for the young people that you're serving? Why is that so important to help them?
I think it really gets to the point of what we've been sharing is that not all young people are experiencing some type of trauma or challenge, and so it's really creating that trust between our organizations or their mentor or their peers, really, right, as well, creating a safe space for them to also get together, talk about what's happening in the neighborhood. One thing we do at Erie is we have a youth council, and it's really an opportunity for us to ask the young people, like, what do you want to see this summer? What's the programming? What conversations do you want to engage in? Because it's also an opportunity for them to build that camaraderie among themselves, in addition to having adults and other caring individuals in their lives. The other piece is that we're also trying to understand what is their dynamic, what's happening in the home. We may, to your point, not need something in the moment, but you know that at Erie or at BUILD or wherever that is, that you'll have somewhere to turn to have access to resources. I think it's really a big part of the work that we're doing is letting people know that we exist, letting folks know that they have access to these resources and how and when they can tap into them as well.
Damien, Michelle mentioned the importance of having people in the young, working with the young people that they view as credible, that are credible actors. I know that that's very important in your violence intervention work. Can you talk about that as well? That the people that you bring to the table to work with the young people, that they view them as credible actors. Why is that important, and how do you identify those people?
Sometimes I think we try to overcomplicate the solutions to some of these issues because the issues are big. They are pervasive across different pockets within our city and have been going on for a long time, particularly as we think of violence. But time and time again, when our violence interrupters, who are boots on the ground folks within our organization, come back and report to us, helping us to understand what is making the most impact. It's one word consistently: relationships. It's we're showing up to the hospitals when there are violent activities that are happening, because in many instances we already know those families. So versus somebody else coming and potentially, exacerbating the situation, we have our folks going in, our case managers, and like I said, our violence interrupters, who are able to diffuse situations. Why? Because again, they have relationships. So I think, to your question and to the points that are made, those relationships, be it we call it mentorship or a buddy or somebody I can call on, any time of the day. We just really need to understand, let's stop overcomplicating solutions to things that we've already figured out. And let's just call this out, overcomplicating how and what we should be prioritizing resources for.
Right.
Everybody around the table has said something along the lines of, we need more nurturing adults. The data proves it, by the way, as well. When nurturing adults show up in the lives of kids, transformation is going to occur. Be it academically, be it with the violence, right? Be it with other very important post-secondary factors. So let's put the money behind it.
So is that nurturing adults, is that volunteers, or is that investments for you all to hire people?
I mean, I think it's all the things, right? Part of the great work and conversations that we've been having around Upstream is this more investment in younger people, right? Trying to get ahead of those opportunities to potentially be involved in violence or other type of activity in their neighborhood. And so really focusing on that. And we've all mentioned today, where's the gap? And it's in the funding and sustainable funding to make sure that we're able to continue to provide these services year after year, because to your point, it's pervasive, it's still ongoing, right? And so how do we make sure that our programs are sustainable?
Right. So the message, I think, in part to the people watching is to support policies and support government and intervention that includes financial support for the work that you do. And in the long run, it's going to help make our city better. So first of all, thank you. Thank you very much for all that you all are doing for our young people. They are what we have to build our city on, and so we need them to have a future for us to have a future. And so I have to say goodbye to you, Cristina and Damien and Michelle. Adam gets to stay for our next roundtable discussion, where we'll continue this important conversation with Cook County Justice Advisory Council's Avik Das and the former Chief of Safety and Security at CPS, Jadine Chou. Stay with us.
Hi, I'm financial expert Tamara Durbin, inviting you to join me each week for In the Money, the show that makes money management approachable and enjoyable. Join the conversation at 7 p.m. exclusively on CAN TV Cable Channel 19, or stream live on cantv.org or on the CAN TV Plus app. Elevated conversation and storytelling. Experience the power of community television.
When it comes to supporting young people in Chicago, policy, funding, and partnerships all play a critical role in shaping outcomes that can last a lifetime. From classrooms to after-school programs, from mental health to community safety, the systems that serve youth must work together to be truly effective. How do policy decisions, resource allocation, and cross-sector collaboration impact youth services across the city? And what will it take to ensure every young person has access to the support and opportunity they deserve? To help answer these pressing questions, Adam and I are joined at the roundtable by Avik Das, Executive Director of the Cook County Justice Advisory Council, and Jadine Chou, the former Chief of Safety and Security at Chicago Public Schools. Welcome, Jadine and Avik. Nice to see you. Let's just start with, from your perspective, Avik, what are you seeing as the gaps in youth services across the city, or are you seeing any?
Thank you, Andy. When it comes to gaps in youth services, I think I'm going to approach it from the perspective of not that things are wholly missing, but perhaps they're all in silos. That these are gaps of folks all wanting to do their best for young people, but there's not necessarily enough coordination across different segments. And I'm going to specifically speak about the gap between concepts around how we show up for youth when it comes to public safety versus how we show up for youth in other systems like healthcare, education. So I think there's a significant role for government to join alongside civic partners, private foundations, service providers, to be able to make sure that there is no wrong door for young people who might otherwise stumble into the justice system, be proximate to contact with law enforcement, to being able to access the same services that we would want for all young people to access in education and health so that they might succeed.
All right. So Jadine, you spent many years at CPS working with young people, particularly those who are facing challenges and having significant issues. Did you see that challenge that Avik just talked about, the silos of services, so that it became more challenging to get support for a young person who needed help?
Absolutely. I fully agree that the lack of coordination really exacerbated any challenges in funding that we might have. So it was always our goal to make sure that wherever we had programming, that it was coordinated with community-based partners, with the city officials, with our partners at the county, so that on the ground we had that coordination. And last but not least, of course, our young people. Right. One of the biggest things I think that sometimes people miss is not involving their young people and their families in that solution. And so that was something that, if you think about glass half full, we took what we had and we did the best by trying to make sure we had that coordination.
Adam, as part of your Upstream Coalition, as part of that effort working to advance more collaboration across these different service silos?
Sure. No, absolutely. It is the very reason when we brought everyone together for the summit this past December, resoundingly everyone said this was long overdue and needed, because you're in your community, you're in your organization doing the work. Sometimes it's hard to look up and say, oh, my neighbor is actually right next door. And I think of examples with CPS and with Jadine, who did a great job from a large system, to say, hey, this young person needs X, Y, and Z. Can you do this? And we've got someone else here to do it. That level of coordination does take time. It takes a lot of trust. And so in the summit, one of the things that came out across the board was we need to know who we all are, what the landscape of providers is, and then how do we work together? And how do we form this great bridge for young people and families to be able to access all the services and supports they may need?
So, Avik, have you seen some examples of successful cross-collaboration that you think work really well?
Certainly. I'm going to speak broadly just in the last decade of work that would have me at the table alongside Chicago Public Schools and Jadine, alongside the great work of BUILD and the whole network of caretakers of young people in the neighborhoods of our city and our suburbs of Cook County. The key examples that I want to bring up are where we center the young person and not the crime. So when we talk about that, when we talk about a young person and how a neighborhood shows up, even if that young person is caught up in the legal system. In my role previously as the chief of juvenile probation for several years, I was able to benefit from the great work of BUILD or Chicago Public Schools and Jadine to be able to say, how do we bring our young people back to being connected to systems of care so they're not lost to our jails, to a pattern of violence that might rob our neighborhoods of their future potential in these young people. So when it comes to the models that you had asked about, I'm looking for services that might actually view the young person as an opportunity, not an emergency, not a threat. Mentorship, identifying what might be the needs and the natural supports the young person already has, and what's the story that accompanied them into, let's say, the system or the situation that they find themselves. So I'm not specifically speaking to an exact type of program, but a relationship that is probably common to all the best, most effective programs.
So all of you have worked either worked in or with government and trying to create programs or get resources for young people. What action steps, ideas do you have to make sure that the policymakers or those that are making the funding decisions understand what it is you need? Because as you all know, sometimes the people who are making the decisions about the policy have a particular perspective. I mean, I think, for example, we just saw that with the teen takeovers, right? The immediate reaction is, let's put a curfew in, and then people started talking about it. So what steps did you take to make sure that people could see from your perspective on the ground how to make better policy decisions? I'll start with you, Jadine.
Yeah, I'll start by saying we really want to use data and research to back up what we're trying to sell.
Right.
If we come in too much with anecdotes, people are like, oh, well, that's not going to be replicated. Oh, we can't scale that.
Right.
And so when we partner with our university researcher partners, like Northwestern, like University of Chicago, we can come in and say, there's some evidence behind this. This is a good investment. But then in addition, and you brought up the teen takeovers, it's really important when we, as Avik said, when we center the voices of our young people. Who better to know what do we do about this situation than to talk to those who are involved with that?
Right.
And over, and I think we're going to continue to do this as we approach summer. We're going to bring young people together and working with different parts of government as well as community organizations like BUILD and like others to bring people together to say, young people, what are your thoughts around this? And it doesn't mean that young people can't come downtown. I don't think anybody is saying that.
Right.
I think what we're saying is, how can we do this in a way that is safe for everyone, especially you young people?
Right. Adam, how about you? I mean, you have to work with funders and policymakers a lot. What are some things you think about in terms of trying to influence their decisions to better align with what you are actually seeing in your work?
Yeah, and I'm going to pull out one specific thing that I know I've tried to echo more to our funding partners has been the restrictions around it. Sometimes when you need to support a young person, you need to have some flexibility within those dollars to do a bit more. As I mentioned, it could be that the household's lights are turned off and this young person needs to be able to turn on his computer and do his homework, as does the family need electricity. So to have funding that's flexible enough to trust the organization to make a decision to say, we're going to make sure those lights get turned on today. I think one of the things we're calling for is a high level of flexibility within funding streams. And so we should always be held accountable. So if we said we're going to serve 1,000 kids, we should serve 1,000 kids. But there's a high level of trust I think needs to be given to organizations to be able to make those last minute decisions that ultimately prove for better outcomes, right? So one of the things I've been sort of sharing with folks who give money is also multi-year. So it's not just a 1 year, you may have it and you may lose it, but we need multi-year because getting to know and build trust with a young person doesn't happen right away. It could take 6 months sometimes just to get sort of on the level ground.
Right. It's a great point. It takes time, and I think that raises kind of another issue and a question I'll just throw out to the group, and that is, again, the teen takeover is just one example, but it happens all the time. There's a problem, something happens, young people are involved, something happens. There's a lot of young people. It used to happen to you at CPS all the time, and people react to the problem. Right? They don't, and they go like, we got to fix that problem. They don't react to the bigger issues that are at play. How did you work to address that, to get people focused like, okay, we're going to fix your problem, but we got to start over here first?
Thank you. I appreciate the examples you've provided because I think there is sort of an old adage that if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Right.
And in this particular case, if we're reacting to the things that trouble us, we're not necessarily addressing the things that trouble our youth.
Right. Ooh,
and in this particular case, we are losing sight of the kinds of things, let's say that organizations like BUILD or the spaces that Jadine creates in CPS, where we're looking at young people for their assets and not defining them by things that might be very scary, very troubling. We're going to be able to say, how do we identify the opportunities and then service around them? So from a policy perspective from government, we're not we are hoping not to be reactive, but to very much identify the relationships that are credible in the community, that come alongside the communities that are disproportionately represented in our justice system or in our statistics around crime.
Right.
And be able to say, what are the credible types of supports that our young people are actually engaging and that resonate with them. And this isn't going to be measured by the fact that there was a teen takeover,
Right.
but in fact, there are so many young people graduating with a much more positive trajectory thanks to their engagement with these longer term services.
Right, right. Jadine, you touched on using data. What about using social media or using technology to help connect with kids? Because they're spending so much of their time on social media. Is that something you did or dealt with?
Yeah, social media can be a positive or a negative.
Exactly.
Depending on how you use it. And so, one of the things, again, in engaging with young people, they do tell us that is a source of information for us. Right. And so how can we turn it into a positive? And one thing I did learn, I don't want to say the hard way because I learned it pretty quickly, is someone from my lived experience is not the person to create the messaging for the young people. That's not who they are listening to on social media. And so how do we work with young people to create that messaging, the credible messengers? Because they do respond. And some of the things that we tested are things called nudging, like how do we text out messages, positive messages. And it's two-way. It's not just sending positive message to the young person. If they need support, if they're going through a mental health crisis or some sort of situation, they also wanted a way to communicate back, even if anonymously. And so these are things that we have studied and are continuing to study because social media is not going away. Right. And so how can we leverage it in a way that's helpful and less harmful?
So, we've talked a little bit about policy, we talked a little bit about trying to better align funding and funding decisions. What gives you all hope? Right, because I think sometimes we kind of teeter between there's so much violence and the young people are all, we hear statistics that are really unnerving, but you all either are at or have been at the forefront with working and talking to our young people. Adam, what gives you hope?
All of them do, and I say that not cheaply, but I really do mean that because you look at the young person who's never picked up a paintbrush before and creates for the first time and has a sense of pride. We see the young people who we've mentored all on the way, didn't think they would get to college, but they got to college, they did it, and then they want to come back and work in their very neighborhood because of the mentoring and that relationship was so rich. This is how they want to give back. That's the beautiful part of watching our young people grow up and be what they can be. We just need to continue to be investing in their lives, loving on them through thick and thin, right? We don't have to like all the things that they do, but we have to love them. We were all teenagers once. We all made bad choices at some point, right? And thankfully our families and mentors helped us along the way. And so I believe in every single one of our young people that have that potential.
Avik, how about you?
Thank you. I'm building on what Adam spoke in terms of hope and what gives you hope. Young people for sure and the successes. But that hope translates to energy that I think I'm not alone in government spaces where we're saying now more than ever, we're gonna hold a principled stance in supporting communities through successful supports for young people, for families. And ultimately, I'm finding hope in the rooms where they are politically charged because I think folks want to see results. But I'm saying right alongside my colleagues at the state and the city, a coordinated effort to say the way we're going to get those results long term is to support investment in these very, very specific relationships helping our youth and families. There's belief there.
Jadine, we're just about out of time, so you have a really short, what gives you hope?
I will just say we are very lucky to be in the city of Chicago because we do have that coordination and commitment, and I'm just very hopeful for the young people of our future.
Oh, thank you. Well, I'm hopeful because really we have people like you who've been working with our young people and are committed to our young people and helping them find their pathway. So thank you. I want to thank you all for being here. I really appreciate you and for all the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
And thank you for tuning in, Chicago. That's our time for now. We'll be live next week for another all-new edition of Chicago Newsroom 2.0. Until then, Be well and well informed.